Hello folks, welcome to my YouTube channel Learn to Code by Saurav. Today we are going to create an end-to-end working API. This API is for creating a user, or we can say register user API. If you are new to the channel, please watch the previous videos in the series so that you will get better understanding of what we are doing here. The link of the video is in the description below. Now let's start with the video. Let's first create the database into the MySQL database. Open MySQL workbench, search for workbench. So I'm using MySQL workbench as a client tab for a DB. So let's quickly create the database. Click create a new schema and create a new schema. Name the schema. So schema name is just a database name. So I'll name this database name as user underscore service underscore DB. Okay. Click on apply. Click on apply. Now finish. Now you can see user service DB has been created. So currently it has no tables. So I will not create table in DB directly. I will let Springboot application to create the table into the DB with the help of Spring Data GPA. Now that the DB has been created, let's quickly create an entity class in the application. Right click on the base package, click on new, click on package, name this package as entity, create an entity class, click on Java class. I'll name this class as user, as we are going to create a REST API for user. So we will store user related information like first name, last name, email, password. Okay. Let's create some attributes of user. Private, long, ID, private, string, first name, private string, last name, private string, email, string, phone number, private string, password. So as I'm not using Lombok, I will have to create a setter and getter methods for the corresponding attributes in order to access these private states from other classes. So right click on IntelliJ, in the same file, click on generate, click on getter and setter, select all attributes, click on OK. Now you can see the setter and getter methods for the user has been generated. Let's create one more method, toString method. Generate toString for all the attributes. Okay. Yep. Let's mark this class as entity class. And Also mark this class as table and name this table as user. Okay. Yes, generated value, generation type, auto, generate ID, strategy. Now let me quickly explain these attributes and annotation is all about. So this entity class, this means this specifies the current class as an entity class but not a normal class. So this is not a simple project, this is an entity class which will be specifically used for the database. Let's come to the table annotation. So this means it marks the class as a primary table for the current entity class. If we don't specify this annotation, Spring Data JPA will append this annotation at runtime and name this table as user, same as entity class. And this ID annotation, this means this is a representation of primary key of the database records. So once the connection is established, when we run the application, it will create a database record, a database table with the name of this user and the columns with the name of this column. And the column name will be as these attributes: ID, first name, last name, email, and phone number. Now let's create a repository interface which will act as a persistence layer to communicate with DB. So click on repository package, click on new, click on Java class, select interface, name this interface as user repository because we are going to create a repository or persistence layer for user. Click enter. Let's extend this repository with JPA JPA repository and let's add the type of entity which is user and the primary key type long. Mark this layer or interface as repository so that Springboot can know that this bean exists. So Spring Data GPA provides out-of-the-box functionality to work with DB like save all, delete, find by ID, etc. etc. Let me show you quickly. Click on this GPA repository with the control button. As you can see here, this has lot of functionalities. Find all, find all with sort object, find all by ID, iterable IDs, save all, save and flush, and so on. So we don't have to write anything here, any code here, unless there is a specific requirement. So we will write all the logic to save and delete, create, update in the service layer, which is a business logic. Now let's create a service class and I will name this class as a user service. So let's go to the package called service, right click on it, click on new, click on Java class, name this as user service, click enter, mark this class as @service in order to be identified by Springboot. Let's inject user repository interface into this class. Private user repository, user repository. Mark this as auto wired. So now we have the user service class and we have the object of user repository. With the help of this, we can make a call to user repository and save the user into DB. Now let's create a method to save a user. This is to save a single user. So public user save user and user. Let's import this user object here. Let's write the code to save the user. Save user. So we'll use user repository dot save method and we'll pass this user object here and simply return. So let me explain you this logic. So whenever this save user method will get called, then user repository dot save method will be executed and this user object will be saved into DB with the help of data GPA. Or this code snippet will save the user into DB and return the user object. Whatever the object has been saved, the details of that object will be returned. Now let's create the controller class, which is, or we can say, REST API, from where we will invoke the save user method and this user will get saved into the DB and the same will return into the response. Let's quickly create the controller class. Select controller package, click on new Java class, and in this class as user controller. We can name this as user resource as well. It's totally based on individual's choice. In order to create the REST API, make this class as a REST API. We will mark this class as REST controller. REST controller. This means this class has become a REST API. Now it can accept a JSON request or XML request and send a JSON response or XML response. So by default, this API will accept a JSON request and send the JSON response. Let's map the request. Let's do the request mapping. Request mapping slash user. Let's inject user service class, user service, auto wire it. The same way we auto wired user repository to user service. User service. Now public response entity of user save user. Let's import this class. So we are going to create a new user. So we will map We will mark this method as post mapping. Whenever we make the request with the URL save user and the method type or the request type post, then it will land here in the save user method. Let's use request body annotation for user. This means whatever the user details comes in the request will be mapped to this Java user object. Now let's write the logic to save the user saved user equal to user service dot save user method, and we'll pass this object to user service class. It is as simple as that. So this means user is saved into the DB, and we will hold the saved user details into the saved user object variable. So once the user is saved, we will send this saved user details back to the client. Now we will return this saved user details back to the client. So how do we do that? Let's write return new response entity saved user and the HTTP status created. This means request comes to /user URL with the request type post. So request will land here in this method, and the user details in the request body will be mapped to this Java object user. We will pass this user to save user service class, and this user will get saved into the DB and will be returned back. We will hold that details into the save user variable, and we will pass this we will pass this object into the response entity with the status created. This means response will be sent back to the client with the status created and the user details. Now let's write the DB connection properties into the properties file. I will use the application.yml file to store the configuration properties instead of this application.properties file. I will simply remove this file and create a new file with the YML extension. Let's delete this. I don't need this static and template folder also. Let's delete. Right click on the resources, new file, application, application.yml. Now the file is created. Now let's write connection properties. Right, Spring data source URL. URL is JDBC because data GPS internally uses Hibernate and Hibernate internally uses JDBC. So JDBC MySQL database or database we're using MySQL. Location of the database localhost port number 3306. Database schema user service DB, which we have created in the beginning of this video. Username of the database root. I have root username and password is Sarvi AMR123. You can create your own user as you if you want. Now let's write the JPA properties. JPA Hibernate DDL auto update. This DDL auto update means whenever we start the application, that is Spring Data JPA will try to establish the connection between the application and the database and try to locate the table with the name of the entity classes which we have created in the application. Let's say we have users, it will try to locate user class or sorry user table into the DB. If it is not there in the DB, then this update command will create a new one, and we will and then in the next operation onwards we will keep on updating on the table. If it is already there, then we'll simply update it. That's what this command is for. Let's move ahead. Let's write few more properties. Properties hibernate dialect rg hibernate dialect MySQL 8 dialect. As we are using MySQL database, we have to specify this dialect. If we are using some other database, let's suppose Postgres or Oracle, so we have to use the specific dialect for the Oracle or PostgreSQL. But we are using MySQL, then we have to use MySQL dialect so that data GPA can know that we are using MySQL database, and accordingly data GPA will create the query as per the strategy of the MySQL database. Now that we are all done, we have created user controller class, user entity, user repository, and user service. We have written the logic to save the user into the DB. We have created a we have written a we have written a connection properties to establish the connection between application and the database. Now we should be good to start the application. Now let's try to start the application. Click on start button. Let's see if it is starting or not. Yeah, you can see it has been started. This line, it is running on port number 8080, server Tomcat. If you remember, I've told you that if we start the application, GPA will try to create a table with the entities classes available in the application. If it is already available in the database, then it will update. So this is the first time we are starting this application. So this user table should be created into the database. So let's check if this table has been created or not. Let's open Workbench, user service app. Let's refresh it. See, we have the table user with the columns ID, email, first name, last name, phone number, and the Hibernate sequence. It will be automatically created by data GPA to store the sequence in order to manage the primary keys. So application has been started. Now let's test our API. So we have API called save user. We have user details like first name, last name, email, and phone number. ID will be automatically generated by the database. So how do we test this API? So we will make a call to this URL and with the user details, and it will save the data into the DB. So we'll make a JSON request. We will use Postman tool to make a call. So let's quickly open the Postman. Just Postman. Let's write the URL localhost. It is running on localhost colon port number. Port number is 8080 slash user. This will come here. This slash user, and request type is post. In the body, click on row JSON, and here we will write a JSON object. So what details we have? Click on user. We have to pass first name, last name, email, and phone number in order to save it. So we have to write this properties exactly in the Postman as written here, because it is a case sensitive. First name, I would say ABC, comma, last name XYZ, email, we'll say abc@gmail.com, phone number, any interview number. There is no validation yet. I'll make a separate video for the validation. So I think we are good to make the request. The request type post, this is the URL, and this is the user data we want to save. If it is saved properly, then the same data will be returned as a response with the status created. Let's try to hit the send button. Yeah, as you can see here, it has been created. ID automatically generated by one. First name, last name, email, phone number, and the status 201 created. Now let's quickly check the database if it is saved into the DB or not. Well, let's use user service DB. Select star from user service DB user. See, the user has been saved properly into the DB. So in this video, we have created full-fledged working API, which is a save user API, or we can say register user API. We have tested it with the Postman. It is working properly as we expected. The data is getting saved into the DB. So this is it, guys. Let me know if you have any queries. Please write down in the comment below. I will try to answer your queries. If you find this video helpful, please do like, share, and subscribe. Thank you, guys. I'll see you in the next video.